Okay, so now everybody is in GitHub. So we're going to switch over from here to, I'm going to switch over to here. Okay, so if I open up GitHub desktop, right, this should look a little familiar, right? Looks kind of like yours. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can do in here, but we're going to do one thing. So remember how I said you can close GitHub? I lied. You can open up GitHub. We're going to use the web browser to do this first thing. So if I go to github.com, you get something like this, right? You should have a little green button over here that says new. Y'all see that on yours?
No.
Okay, what do you see?
Start a new repository.
Okay, click on that. You're in github.com, not the desktop.
Yeah, I'm in
Yeah.
GitHub.com.
So you should click on that as long as it takes you to a page that looks like this. This is how you can create a remote repository. I'm going to hopefully tonight show you both ways to make these. This is a way to do it. So every time you create a repository, you're the owner, unless you make somebody else the owner. Because you're on a team, clicking the drop down, you'll actually see any teams you're a part of, any of your organizations. We're not going to worry about the organizations right now. We're just going to keep it to ourselves. And you give it a name. And when you give it a name, avoid spaces. Hyphens, underscores, perfect. I'm just going to call this my test repo with hyphens in it. And these names are specific to you. So you can name these whatever you want, and as long as you only have one thing with that name, you're good. There's a whole bunch of options here you can do. For what we're doing right now, you can leave it as public. It doesn't matter. If you want to make it private, that's fine. And just click Create Repository. And what this does is it creates an empty repository. There's nothing in it. Okay? Are y'all seeing a page like this now? Okay. No?
Yes.
Okay. We're going to just minimize this because we might come back to it. I haven't decided yet. All right. But in your application on your desktop now, you can clone a repository from the internet. Y'all see this option? It's the second one on mine. If you click on it, it looks like this. Y'all got that? Okay. And what you can do is you can search for your repositories. Now, we just created a repository, so you might need to click refresh. But if you start typing the name, my test repo, it should pop up. And if it's not, you may need to refresh. And so after I refresh, it does pop up. It'll have your username / the name of it. You got it? When you see that, there's a local path down here. And this tells you where on the computer it's going to create it. Now, most of the time, it's going to put it in Documents, GitHub, My Test Repo when you copy it down like that. This part doesn't really matter, so I'm just going to click Clone. So cloning is an important concept in Git. Cloning is when you say, hey, there's this repo that exists somewhere. I want to make a copy of it on my computer. It's how you take the remote and create a local. And so now you have a copy of this repo on your computer. There's nothing in it, so it's hard to tell, but it's there. All right, any questions up to this point? Okay. This is not the way you will usually make repos. There will be a different way we go about it, but this is one of the ways to do it. Okay. So we're gonna set Git aside for a minute. We're gonna minimize this because we're gonna move on to the other tool right now. So the other tool we're gonna use a lot is Visual Studio Code. Now, when you installed Visual Studio Code, you did it a special way. The software package, software library that we primarily use in FRC is called WPILib, and when you install that, it installs a version of VS Code with it. So on your desktop, you should see an icon that looks like this hexagon that says 2024 WPILib VS Code. There may be another one here that says 2024 WPILib documentation. That's not the one we want. We want VS Code. So if you double click on that, you'll open it up and it should look something like this. Now, there's a couple of things that you probably want to be aware of here. If you ever install a separate VS Code, because you can have multiple on your computer, you always want to make sure you've opened the right one for robotics programming. And the way to tell is this little icon up here. If you see the hexagon with a W in it, it's the right one. Okay. How many of you ever used VS Code before? Okay. It's a text editor, and that's it. It doesn't do anything else. With some exceptions. So it's an extensible text editor, and it can do a lot, but you have to let it do what you want it to do. So one thing you can do in VS Code is open files, and it's really good at opening files. If you click on the Open File button, or if you click on the File, Open File, you can do that. So don't do this. I'm just going to show you what it looks like on mine, but if I were to open File, see if I got anything downloads worthwhile. No. What about documents? Oh yeah, I bet there's something in GitHub. Nope, just my test repo. Man, I have a very clean slate in here. What if I go to the desktop? I got something in desktop. That's a recovery file. Man, I do not have documents. Been overzealous in my deletions. Here we go. There might be something in here. Info.plist. Sure, I'll open it. So here's a file. Obviously, it's not a great file. It's got a lot of binary in it. But you can edit this file, do whatever you want to it. When you're programming in VS Code, unless you're doing just like a script, you will almost never open files. What you're more likely to open is a folder, because a folder contains a project. Anyway, that's how you do the file. Next thing we're gonna do is talk about folders. So folders are important because a folder is going to contain a whole repo. And it's very important that you're able to open the folder the right way. So if you're on this screen, you've got this handy dandy open folder button, but you always can go to File and click on Open Folder. And again, most of the time you're going to be opening folders. So if you go to Open Folder, we're going to open up that repo we made. So on yours, you'll open Folder, and we got to remember where it puts it. The GitHub repos usually get put in Documents, GitHub, My Test Repo. So right now I'm in the GitHub folder. If I click Select Folder right now, it will open that GitHub folder and everything inside it. But we don't want that. We want to open the test repo. So I've got the test repo selected. I select Folder. And it's going to do a few things. One of the first things it'll do is ask you if you trust the authors. Are you guys seeing the "Do you trust this" pop up? In this case, who is the author? Where did the code come from? It came from your GitHub. In this case, you're the author. Do you trust the author? In this case, you better. Now, you can automatically trust authors in this folder all the time. I never do it. I do it one by one. But you should only get that the first time you open the folder. So now you actually have opened the folder. You can't really tell, but it's open. So how can you tell? So on the left-hand side of your screen, you've got a bunch of buttons over here. The button that looks like Files is the File Explorer tab. You can see what's in it. And the way to tell what you opened is right here at the top. It says my-test-repo. And that is the folder that I opened. If I opened a different folder, it would have a different name there.